Welcome to our channel. Here we read Bible stories written for children and adults alike. Our verse today is Hebrews 11:6a. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. God sent Moses to Egypt. He wanted Moses to lead the Israelites out of slavery. When God told Moses to lead his people, he gave him the ability and the means, the miracles, to show God's power to do it. Moses lacked faith in his ability, even when God said in Exodus 4:12, "I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say." But Moses was afraid and lacked faith. Therefore, he didn't want to obey God. Our story today is entitled, Moses is Sent to Egypt. So God told Moses to go to his own people, still suffering in Egypt. There he must tell them to gather all the elders, or leaders of families, together, and explain to them why God had sent him. With the elders, he must go to Pharaoh and ask permission to take the Israelites a 3 days journey into the wilderness in order to sacrifice to God. But strangely, God told Moses that he knew Pharaoh would not allow them to go. Then God would stretch out his hand and punish Egypt by wonderful deeds. In the end, the people of Israel would come out of Egypt. Poor Moses was still afraid, though. He was sure the Israelites would not listen to him. Then God gave him a sign. In his hand he had a rod, a walking stick which he used when watching the sheep. God told him to throw it on the ground, and immediately it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back in fright, but God told him not to be afraid and to take hold of it by the tail. When he did so, the snake turned back into a walking stick again. Then God gave Moses a second sign. He had to put his hand inside his cloak against his chest. When he pulled it out, it was snow white with a terrible sickness of leprosy. When he put it back in and pulled it out once more, the leprosy disappeared. Then God said to Moses, "When you go to the people of Israel and they refuse to listen to you, show them these 2 signs. If they still will not listen, dip some water out of the river and pour it out on the ground. It will turn to blood." Moses was still afraid. He argued that he was not a good speaker. This time God was angry and said, "Am I not the Lord who made man's mouth? Do I not make all men? Aaron the Levite is your brother. When you get to Egypt, he will come out to meet you. He will go with you, and he will be your spokesman. But do not forget your walking stick. You will have to use it to show great signs." So Moses took his wife and sons and returned to Egypt. As God had said, Aaron came out to meet Moses, and Moses told him all. Then together they went and gathered together all elders of Israel, gave them God's message, and showed them the signs. Let's repeat our verse. Hebrews 11:6a. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. I'm going to ask you a few questions now. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it, and then I'll give you the answer. Number 1, when Moses got to Egypt, what was he to do? He was to go to the Israelites and tell them God's plan. Number 2, why was Moses afraid? He felt he didn't have the ability to speak effectively to the Israelites. Number 3, what were the signs God gave Moses? Moses' rod became a serpent. The serpent changed back into a rod. His hand grew leprous, and then his hand was healed. And water was turned into blood. Number 4, why were the signs necessary? The signs were necessary to show God had the power and ability to save. And finally, number 5, what was Aaron's job going to be? Aaron was going to be a spokesman for Moses. A lesson to learn is that God chooses imperfect people, and he prepares them to do his work. God promised to be with Moses and to help him know what to say. We sometimes, like Moses, are afraid and lack faith. Therefore, we don't want to obey God. Remember our verse, Hebrews 11:6. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. God even gave Moses miracles to prove his great power. God stands by us as well, ever present and unchangeable, completely sufficient to do what he chooses for us to do and to accomplish what he wills to accomplish in our lives. God wanted to deliver his people, the Israelites, from slavery. God wants to deliver us from sin, which becomes a habit similar to slavery. Thank you for joining us on our Bible reading journey. I hope you can join us next time as we continue our story entitled, God Deals with His Egyptian Enemies.